The morning sun cast long shadows across the tarmac as Captain Marcus Johnson stepped out of his car in the employee parking lot of SkyWest Airlines headquarters. The Atlanta summer heat was already building, promising another scorching day. Marcus straightened his uniform jacket and adjusted his captain's hat, checking his reflection in the car window. At 45, his short hair showed touches of gray at the temples, adding to the distinguished appearance that had earned him respect in the cockpit for nearly 2 decades. Marcus glanced at his watch. 8:15. He was 15 minutes early for his meeting with the operations team. Just as he preferred to be for everything in his life, punctuality had been drilled into him by his father, a military man who believed that being on time meant being late. Today's meeting was particularly important. Marcus had developed new fuel efficiency protocols that could save the airline millions while reducing their carbon footprint. After months of research and testing, he was finally presenting his findings to the executive team. As he walked through the parking lot, Marcus nodded to several ground crew members who recognized him. Many looked up to Marcus, not just as one of the airline's most experienced pilots with over 20,000 flight hours, but as proof that barriers could be broken. In his 15 years with SkyWest, Marcus had become the only black senior captain, a fact that the company often highlighted in their diversity materials while doing little to change the actual demographics of their pilot corps. The glass doors of the headquarters building slid open as Marcus approached. The lobby was quiet at this hour, with only a few employees hurrying to their offices. The massive SkyWest logo dominated the wall behind the reception desk, where a young woman with blonde hair was typing rapidly on her computer. "Good morning," Marcus said as he approached the desk. "Captain Marcus Johnson, I have an 8:30 meeting with Mr. Patterson and the operations team." The receptionist, whose nameplate read Heather Collins, looked up from her screen. Her smile faltered slightly as she took in Marcus's appearance, a reaction so subtle that most might have missed it. But Marcus had seen it countless times before, that brief moment of surprise, of recalibration. "Oh, you're here for the operations meeting?" she asked, her tone carrying a note of surprise that felt out of place for someone arriving for a scheduled appointment. "That's right," Marcus replied with a professional smile, choosing, as he often did, to ignore the implied question beneath her words. "I believe Mr. Patterson is expecting me." Heather's fingers clacked on the keyboard as she checked something on her screen. She picked up her phone and dialed an extension, turning slightly away from Marcus as she spoke in a lowered voice. "Yes, there's a Captain Johnson here for the fuel efficiency meeting." She paused, listening. "Yes, I see, of course." She hung up and turned back to Marcus, her expression now carefully neutral. "Mr. Patterson says you'll need to wait outside until the other captains arrive. Company policy for consultants." Marcus furrowed his brow. "There must be some confusion. I'm not a consultant, I'm a senior captain with this airline. I've been with SkyWest for 15 years. "Those were my instructions, sir," Heather replied firmly. "You can wait in the courtyard. Someone will come get you when they're ready." Marcus felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the tension that came with these moments when he had to decide how to respond, make a scene and be labeled as difficult or aggressive, accept the slight and maintain the peace. "I see," he said finally, his voice level despite the anger building inside him. "And where is this courtyard?" Heather pointed toward a side door. "Through there. It's a nice day to wait outside at least." Marcus nodded stiffly and turned away, feeling her eyes on his back as he walked toward the door. The courtyard was a small, landscaped area with several benches surrounding a decorative fountain. It was empty at this hour, the maintenance staff having already completed their morning duties. He took a seat on a bench with a view of the building's entrance, placing his briefcase beside him. Inside were printouts of his research, graphs showing potential savings and testimonials from other pilots who had tested his methods. Months of work, treated as if it were an afterthought. As he sat, his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a text from his wife, Linda. "Good luck today. They're going to love your presentation. Dinner tonight to celebrate?" Marcus smiled, despite his frustration. Linda had always been his biggest supporter, understanding both his passion for flying and the unique challenges he faced in the industry. He texted back, "Thanks. We'll let you know how it goes." He didn't mention the current situation. No need to worry her when this was just another day, another hurdle. Marcus watched the glass doors of the main entrance, contemplating whether he should go back inside and insist on being treated properly. As he considered his options, a tall white man in a pilot's uniform approached the building. Captain Greg Bennett, one of Marcus's colleagues who had been with the airline for about 8 years, roughly half as long as Marcus. Through the glass, Marcus watched as Bennett approached the reception desk. Heather smiled broadly, immediately, picked up the phone, and within moments a man in a suit, likely Patterson's assistant, appeared to escort Bennett into the building. No waiting outside. No confusion about his role. 5 minutes later, the scene repeated itself when Captain Richard Powell, another white pilot with less seniority than Marcus, arrived and received the same immediate welcome. The message couldn't have been clearer if they'd posted a sign. Marcus's phone buzzed again, this time with a text from First Officer Denise Washington, one of the few black female pilots at SkyWest and someone Marcus had mentored over the years. "How's the meeting going? Did they approve your protocols?" Marcus stared at the message, a cold realization washing over him. In 15 years with SkyWest, this wasn't the first slight he'd experienced, but it was perhaps the most blatant. He had learned to navigate subtle biases. The surprise when he introduced himself as the captain, the passengers who sometimes did a double-take when they saw him in the cockpit, the flight attendants who occasionally directed questions to his white co-pilots instead of him. But being told to wait outside while watching his less experienced white colleagues walk right in, that crossed a line. He thought of the airline's recent public commitment to diversity and inclusion, the glossy marketing materials featuring his image alongside slogans about equal opportunity. He thought about the reality behind those images, how he remained the only black senior captain after all these years, how the few other minority pilots often came to him with stories similar to what he was experiencing right now. Something inside Marcus shifted as he sat on that bench, watching. The minutes ticked by on his watch. It was now 8:40. 10 minutes past the meeting's scheduled start time. His presentation materials remained unopened in his briefcase. His expertise remained outside in the courtyard. For 15 years, Marcus had played by their rules. He had been twice as good, worked twice as hard, and complained half as much as his white colleagues. He had smiled through slights and focused on being a perfect pilot, believing that excellence would eventually overcome prejudice. But as the fountain bubbled beside him and the Atlanta sun climbed higher in the sky, Captain Marcus Johnson made a decision. Excellence wasn't enough. Being patient wasn't enough. Something had to change, and it seemed that he would have to be the one to change it. He stood up, straightened his uniform, and picked up his briefcase. It was time to do more than wait. Marcus walked back into the building with purpose in his stride. The receptionist, Heather, looked up with surprise as he approached her desk again. "Sir, I told you that." "I understand what you told me," Marcus said calmly. "But there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not a consultant. I'm Captain Marcus Johnson, senior pilot with 15 years at this airline. The meeting that's happening right now is about my fuel efficiency protocols." Heather's cheeks flushed. "I'm just following instructions, sir. Mr. Patterson specifically said." "Then I need to speak with Mr. Patterson directly," Marcus said. "Or perhaps Mr. Miller would be interested to know why one of his senior captains is being asked to wait outside while junior pilots are escorted in." At the mention of CEO Alan Miller, Heather's expression changed. She reached for her phone, but Marcus was already walking past her desk toward the elevators. Sir, you can't just..." But Marcus was already stepping into the elevator. He pressed the button for the 4th floor where the operations meeting was being held. As the doors closed, he saw Heather frantically dialing a number. The elevator ride gave Marcus a moment to gather his thoughts. He had always been careful, strategic in how he handled workplace issues. Confrontation wasn't his style. But sometimes, a line had to be drawn. When the elevator doors opened, Marcus walked down the hallway toward conference room 4C. Through The glass wall, he could see 8 men seated around the table. Mr. Patterson, the operations director, was standing at the front of the room beside a projection screen. Captains Bennett and Powell sat among the other executives, all of them white. Marcus opened the door without knocking. The conversation inside stopped immediately. "Captain Johnson," Patterson said, his surprise evident. "We weren't expecting you yet." "Clearly," Marcus replied, "since you told the receptionist to make me wait outside, like a delivery person, or perhaps something else." The room fell into uncomfortable silence. Some of the men looked at their notepads or phones, avoiding eye contact. "There must have been a misunderstanding," Patterson said finally. "We were just reviewing some preliminary data before bringing you in for your presentation." "Preliminary data from my research," Marcus said, "which I wasn't invited to explain," while Captains Bennett and Powell, who weren't involved in the project, were welcomed immediately. Bennett shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Powell stared at the table. "Look, Marcus," Patterson said, switching to a first-name basis, though he used titles for the other captains. "There's no need to make this personal. We value your contribution, that's why we're all here." "Is it?" Marcus asked. He set his briefcase on the table and looked around the room. "Then let me ask you all something. How many of you have ever been told to wait outside a meeting about your own work? How many of you have watched others with less experience walk right in while you sit on a bench?" No one answered. "I didn't think so," Marcus continued. "For 15 years, I've been one of the top pilots at this airline. I've trained many of you. I've never had a safety incident. I've won company awards, yet I'm still treated like an outsider." "That's not fair, Marcus," Patterson said. "SkyWest has a strong commitment to diversity. You're featured in our recruiting materials." "Yes, my face is in your brochures," Marcus agreed. "But when it comes to real inclusion, to respect, that's where SkyWest fails. And it's not just me." Marcus took out his phone and opened his email. "In the past year, I've received 27 messages from other minority employees at this airline describing similar experiences, being overlooked for promotions, being questioned about their qualifications, being mistaken for service staff." He looked directly at Patterson. "You told the receptionist I was a consultant. Why would you assume that?" Patterson's face reddened. "That's not what happened. There was simply a mix-up with the schedule." "A mix-up that only affected me," Marcus noted. "Not Captain Bennett, not Captain Powell, just the only black senior captain in the company." The tension in the room was thick. One of the executives, Sam Reeves from Human Resources, cleared his throat. "Captain Johnson, if you've experienced discrimination, there are proper channels to address that. We have policies." "I've read the policies," Marcus interrupted. "I've followed the channels. I filed 3 reports last year alone, all marked resolved with no action taken." Reeves looked surprised. "I wasn't aware of any reports." "That's part of the problem," Marcus said. "These issues get buried. Meanwhile, SkyWest promotes itself as a leader in diversity while minority employees continue to face barriers." Just then the door opened and CEO Alan Miller walked in, followed by a flustered Heather. "I'm sorry, Mr. Miller," she said. "I tried to stop him." Miller waved her away. "It's fine, Heather, thank you." He looked around the room, taking in the tense atmosphere, then focused on Marcus. "Captain Johnson," he said with a nod. "I was just coming down to see where you were." Heather mentioned there was some confusion about today's meeting. Marcus looked at Miller, trying to gauge if he was being honest or just trying to smooth things over. "There was no confusion, Mr. Miller," Marcus said firmly. "I was deliberately asked to wait outside while my white colleagues were brought in. Immediately. When I asked why, I was told it was company policy for consultants." "I'm not a consultant. I'm a senior captain presenting my own research." Miller frowned and turned to Patterson. "Is this true?" Patterson shifted uncomfortably. "There was a misunderstanding about the schedule. We were going to bring Captain Johnson in after our preliminary discussion." "A discussion about his work, without him present?" Miller asked. "It's standard procedure to review." "Is it standard procedure to make senior staff wait outside?" Miller interrupted. No one answered. Miller turned back to Marcus. "Captain Johnson, I apologize for this situation. It's unacceptable." but I'd like to understand better what you meant about other minority employees facing similar issues. Marcus looked around the room. He had their attention now, but would speaking up make a difference? Or would it just mark him as a troublemaker, someone to be managed and eventually pushed out? He thought about Linda, about what she would say. He thought about Denise Washington and the other minority pilots who looked to him as an example. He thought about all the times he had stayed quiet to keep the peace. "Mr. Miller," Marcus said finally, "what happened today isn't an isolated incident. It's part of a pattern that exists throughout this airline, and I have documentation to prove it." He opened his briefcase, but instead of taking out his fuel efficiency research, he removed a different folder, one he had been compiling for years but had hoped never to use. This contains testimonials from 32 minority employees at SkyWest describing discrimination they've experienced. It includes dates, names, and witnesses. It shows how reports were filed and ignored, how promotions were denied without explanation, how qualified candidates were overlooked. The room was completely silent now. "I didn't come here today to discuss this," Marcus continued. "I came to present my fuel efficiency protocols. But being told to wait outside while watching my white colleagues walk right in, that was the final straw." Miller looked at the folder, then back at Marcus. "May I?" he asked, reaching for it. Marcus handed it over. "There's more where that came from, Mr. Miller. Much more. And if things don't change at SkyWest, the next people to see this information won't be in this room. They'll be at the FAA, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and the press." Miller nodded slowly, a grave expression on his face. "I understand, Captain Johnson, and I'd like to continue this conversation in my office, if you're willing. Right now." Marcus looked around at the stunned faces in the room. "What about my presentation?" "Your fuel efficiency protocols are important," Miller said, "but this is more important. The meeting can wait." Marcus picked up his briefcase. "Lead the way, Mr. Miller." As they walked out together, leaving behind a room full of uncomfortable executives, Marcus knew that his career at SkyWest would never be the same. For better or worse, things were about to change. The walk to Alan Miller's office was silent. Marcus felt the eyes of employees following them as the CEO led him through the executive floor. News traveled fast in corporate settings, and Marcus suspected that word of his confrontation in the meeting room was already spreading. Miller's office occupied the corner of the top floor, with large windows overlooking the Atlanta skyline and the airport in the distance. Aircraft took off and landed in a steady rhythm, a sight that normally filled Marcus with pride. Today it reminded him of the divide between his love for flying and the environment he had to navigate to do it. "Please have a seat," Miller said, gesturing to a leather chair across from his desk. He closed the door and sat down, placing Marcus's folder in front of him. "Do you mind if I look through this now?" "That's why I brought it," Marcus replied. For the next 15 minutes, the only sounds in the room were the turning of pages and Miller's occasional deep breaths. Marcus sat quietly watching as the CEO's expression grew increasingly troubled. Finally, Miller closed the folder and looked up. "I had no idea," he said quietly. "How long have you been collecting these testimonials?" 3 years, Marcus answered. "After my first official complaint was dismissed, I started documenting everything. Other employees began coming to me when they experienced similar treatment." Miller nodded slowly. "Why didn't you bring this directly to me sooner?" "With all due respect, Mr. Miller, I tried the proper channels. Multiple times. Each time I was told that SkyWest takes these matters seriously, that the situation would be addressed. Nothing changed." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "And honestly, I was protecting my career. Speaking up has consequences." Miller winced at that. "That shouldn't be the case." "But it is," Marcus said simply. "Not just at SkyWest. Throughout the industry. Throughout the country. Speaking up means being labeled as difficult, as someone who plays the race card, as not being a team player." Miller was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What changed? Why now?" Marcus thought about the question. "Being told to wait outside while watching my white colleagues walk right in. That was blatant. It was a clear message about where I stand. In this company, despite my experience, despite my contributions. He paused. But it's more than that. I've been having the same conversations with younger black pilots that I had when I started 15 years ago. Nothing has changed. And I realized that if I don't speak up now, I'm part of the problem. Miller nodded. I appreciate your honesty. He tapped the folder. And I appreciate the courage it took to compile this and bring it forward. But I have to ask, what's your goal here, Captain Johnson? What do you want to happen? Marcus had been thinking about this question since he decided to walk back into the building. I want real change, not just words on paper or my face on a brochure. I want equal treatment and opportunities for everyone at this airline, regardless of race, gender, or background. He met Miller's gaze directly. And I want accountability for what's been happening. Accountability means different things to different people, Miller said carefully. What does it mean to you? It means acknowledging the problem publicly. It means reviewing promotion patterns and pay disparities. It means creating a system where complaints are taken seriously and addressed transparently. Marcus paused. And yes, it means consequences for those who have enabled or participated in discrimination. Miller looked out the window at the planes, taking off. What you're asking for would mean significant changes to how we operate. Yes, Marcus agreed. That's the point. Miller turned back to him. You mentioned the FAA, the EEOC, and the press. Is that the direction you're planning to go if we don't address this internally? I'd prefer not to, Marcus said honestly. I've given 15 years to this airline. I want to see it become better, not be damaged. But I will not let this continue. The choice is yours. Miller studied him for a long moment. You know, when I became CEO 3 years ago, I made diversity and inclusion one of our core values. I believed we were making progress. On paper, maybe, Marcus acknowledged. The hiring numbers look better than they did 10 years ago, but numbers don't tell the whole story. They don't capture experiences like being told to wait outside while your white colleagues are welcomed in. Miller nodded slowly. Point taken. He opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a legal pad. I need to understand the full scope of what we're dealing with. Walk me through the key issues you've identified. For the next hour, Marcus detailed patterns of discrimination throughout the airline. He explained how minority pilots were often assigned less desirable routes despite their seniority, how they received harsher critiques during performance reviews, how casual racism was dismissed as just joking around. He shared stories from flight attendants, ground crew, and office staff who had similar experiences. Miller took detailed notes, asking questions but never becoming defensive. When Marcus finished, the CEO looked at his watch and picked up his phone. Nancy, cancel my meetings for the rest of the day, he said to his assistant, and contact the board members. I need an emergency meeting first thing tomorrow morning. He hung up and turned to Marcus. This will take more than a conversation to address. I need time to review everything you've shared and develop a comprehensive response. Time is often used as a way to let things die down, Marcus observed. That's not my intention, Miller assured him, but I can't promise instant solutions to problems that have developed over years. What I can promise is that I will take this seriously and that there will be concrete actions, not just words. Marcus considered this. What happens in the meantime? First, I want to hear more from the employees you mentioned, Miller said. Would they be willing to speak with me directly, with your presence, if that would make them more comfortable? Some would, Marcus said. Others are afraid of retaliation. Understandable, Miller acknowledged. We'll need to address that fear directly. He thought for a moment. Second, I'd like you to work with our HR department to review our policies and procedures. You have a perspective they clearly need. Marcus raised an eyebrow. The same HR department that buried my previous complaints? Fair point, Miller conceded. Which brings me to my third step. I'm going to bring in an external consultant who specializes in workplace diversity and inclusion. Someone who can provide an objective assessment and recommendations. That's a start, Marcus said, not entirely convinced. Miller leaned forward. Captain Johnson, I want to be clear about something. What happened to you today shouldn't have happened. The experiences documented in this folder shouldn't have happened, and the fact that they did happen under my leadership means I've failed in my responsibility. I can't change the past, but I can and will change how we move forward. Marcus studied Miller's face, looking for signs of insincerity. He had heard corporate promises before, but there seemed to be genuine concern and determination in the CEO's expression. "I appreciate that, Mr. Miller," Marcus said finally, "but you should know that I didn't make an empty threat earlier. If I don't see meaningful action, I will take this information public." Miller nodded. "I understand, and I wouldn't expect anything less." He stood up and extended his hand. "I'll contact you tomorrow after the board meeting to discuss next steps." Marcus stood and shook Miller's hand. As he turned to leave, Miller added, "And Captain Johnson, thank you for your courage today. It couldn't have been easy to take this stand." Marcus paused at the door. "It wasn't. But sometimes doing the right thing isn't easy." As he walked out of the office, Marcus felt a mix of emotions: uncertainty about what would happen next, concern about potential backlash, but also a sense of relief. After years of staying quiet, of playing by rules that were never fair to begin with, he had finally spoken his truth. Whatever came next, he would face it knowing he had done what was right. His phone buzzed with a text from Linda. "How did the key presentation go?" Marcus smiled slightly as he typed his response. "Presentation didn't happen, but I think I started something bigger. I'll tell you everything tonight." Marcus woke up early the next morning. He had spent most of the night talking with Linda, explaining everything that had happened at SkyWest headquarters. She had listened, asked thoughtful questions, and ultimately supported his decision to take a stand. "I'm proud of you," she had said, squeezing his hand across the dinner table. "It's about time someone shook things up at that airline." Now, as he sipped his coffee and watched the sunrise from their kitchen window, Marcus wondered what the day would bring. The board meeting Miller had called would be starting soon. Would anything actually change, or would this be yet another case of corporate promises without action? His phone rang at 9:30 a.m. It was Alan Miller. "Captain Johnson," Miller said, his voice sounding tired but determined. "The board meeting just wrapped up. I'd like to meet with you today to discuss our response. Are you available?" "Yes," Marcus replied. "What time?" 11 o'clock at headquarters? I'll have security escort you directly to my office." Marcus noted the different treatment from yesterday. "I'll be there." After hanging up, Marcus called First Officer Denise Washington. He had mentioned her in his discussion with Miller as someone who had also experienced discrimination at the airline. "Denise, I need to tell you what happened yesterday," he began. By the time he finished explaining, Denise was quiet on the other end of the line. "You actually did it," she finally said, her voice a mix of awe and concern. "You called them out." "It was time," Marcus replied. "Miller wants to meet with me today about the board's response. I mentioned your experiences as well." "Using my name?" Denise asked, a hint of worry in her tone. "Yes," Marcus admitted. "I'm sorry if that puts you in an uncomfortable position. But we need voices beyond mine if anything is going to change." Denise sighed. "You're right. It's just, I've worked so hard to get where I am. I don't want to be labeled as a troublemaker." "I understand," Marcus said, "but sometimes trouble is necessary for change." After a moment, Denise said, "Keep me updated on what happens in your meeting. And thank you, Marcus, for being brave enough to do what many of us have only thought about." At 11 o'clock sharp, Marcus walked into SkyWest headquarters. The white-bearded, same receptionist, Heather, was at the desk. She looked up with obvious discomfort as he approached. "Captain Johnson," she said, her tone professionally neutral. "Mr. Miller is expecting you. Security will escort you up." A security guard appeared almost immediately and led Marcus to the elevator. As they rode up, Marcus noticed employees watching him, some whispering to each other. Word had definitely spread about yesterday's events. When they reached Miller's office, the CEO was waiting with two other people. Sam Reeves from Human Resources and a woman Marcus didn't recognize. "Captain Johnson, thank you for coming," Miller said, shaking his hand. "This is Sam Reeves, who you met yesterday, and Dr. Olivia Carter from Equity Workplace Consultants. She'll be helping us address the issues you've raised. Dr. Carter, a Saiweo, black woman in her 50s with short gray hair and sharp eyes, extended her hand. Captain Johnson, I've reviewed your documentation. Very thorough. We have a lot to discuss. They sat around a small conference table in Miller's office. Miller opened a folder in front of him. The board meeting this morning was intense, he began. I presented the evidence you provided, along with my own observations from yesterday's incident. Some board members were defensive, others were shocked. All agreed that we need to take action. Marcus nodded but remained cautious. What kind of action? Miller looked at Dr. Carter, who took over. I've been hired to conduct a complete audit of SkyWest's practices, she explained. Hiring, promotions, route assignments, disciplinary actions. Everything will be examined for patterns of discrimination. I'll be interviewing employees at all levels, reviewing policies, and making recommendations for systemic change. That sounds comprehensive, Marcus acknowledged. But audits take time. What happens immediately? Miller answered this question. First, Mr. Patterson has been placed on administrative leave pending a review of his conduct. The receptionist, who told you to wait outside, is also being investigated. Marcus frowned. I don't want anyone to become a scapegoat. This is about systemic issues, not just individuals. Agreed, Miller said. But individual accountability is part of addressing the larger problem. He continued. Second, we're establishing a diversity and inclusion task force with real authority to implement changes. We'd like you to co-chair it along with Dr. Carter. This surprised Marcus. You want me to take a leadership role in this? Yes, Miller confirmed. You've already shown leadership by bringing these issues forward. We need your perspective and experience to guide our response. Marcus considered this. It was a significant commitment, potentially taking him away from flying temporarily, but it was also an opportunity to create meaningful change from within. Third, Miller continued, the board has approved an immediate review of all promotion, decisions and route assignments from the past 3 years. Any disparities will be addressed, including potential back pay for affected employees. Dr. Carter added, we're also implementing mandatory bias training for all staff, starting with executives and managers, and we're creating a new, anonymous, reporting system for discrimination complaints that bypasses the normal chain of command. Marcus listened as they outlined additional steps, revised hiring practices, mentorship programs for minority employees, regular climate surveys, and public transparency about their diversity efforts and outcomes. When they finished, Miller asked, What do you think, Captain Johnson? Is this a response you can support? Marcus thought carefully before answering. The plan was more comprehensive than he had expected. It addressed many of the issues he had raised, but promises were easy. Implementation was hard. It's a good start, he said finally, but I have concerns about follow-through. I've heard promises before. Dr. Carter nodded. That's why I've insisted on measurable outcomes in regular public reporting. Accountability doesn't work in the dark. And why we want you involved directly, Miller added, to hold us to these commitments. Marcus had one more question. What about my fuel efficiency protocols? The original reason I came in yesterday. Miller smiled slightly. The operations team reviewed them this morning. They're impressed. Implementation planning begins next week with you leading the project. Marcus nodded. At least that part of his work hadn't been lost in the larger issue. There's one more thing, Miller said, his expression growing serious. We're planning a company-wide stand-down day next week. All operations will pause for 24 hours while every employee participates in discussions about workplace culture and inclusion. It will cost the airline millions, but the board agrees it's necessary to signal how seriously we're taking this. Marcus raised his eyebrows. A stand-down was unprecedented in the airline industry, where schedule disruptions typically happened only for safety concerns. You're willing to shut down the entire airline for a day? Yes, Miller said firmly. Sometimes you need to stop everything to fix what's broken before moving forward. Dr. Carter added, The stand-down will include facilitated discussions, training, and listening sessions. We want employees at all levels to understand both the problems and their role in creating solutions. Marcus sat back, processing everything he had heard. It was far more than he had expected when he walked back into the building yesterday after being told to wait outside. "All right," he said finally. "I'll co-chair the task force and help with the stand-down. But I'll be watching closely to ensure these aren't just temporary measures that fade away once the pressure is off." "That's fair," Miller agreed. "We have a lot of work to do to rebuild trust." As the meeting concluded, Dr. Carter pulled Marcus aside. "Just between us," she said quietly. "I've done this work for 20 years. Most companies only act when forced to. The fact that they're willing to shut down operations for a day tells me they're serious. Don't get me wrong. We'll still need to push them. But there's real potential for change here." Marcus nodded, feeling cautiously optimistic for the first time. As he left the building, he noticed employees watching him differently now, some with curiosity, others with respect, a few with clear resentment. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. He texted Linda. "Meeting went well, better than expected. They're shutting down the airline for a day to address discrimination." Her reply came quickly. "Wow, that's huge. All because you refused to wait outside. Proud of you." Marcus smiled as he read her message. Sometimes, the biggest changes began with the smallest stands. 6 months had passed since the day Marcus Johnson was told to wait outside. 6 months of meetings, policy reviews, and difficult conversations. 6 months of resistance from some quarters and surprising support from others. 6 months of the most challenging work Marcus had ever done, even more demanding than learning to fly a commercial airliner. Today, Marcus stood at the podium in the largest conference room at SkyWest headquarters. The room was packed with employees, journalists, and industry representatives. CEO Alan Miller sat to his right, Dr. Olivia Carter to his left. A large screen behind them displayed the results of their work. Statistics showing changes in hiring, patterns, promotion rates, and employee satisfaction across different racial and gender groups. 6 months ago, Marcus began, I was told to wait outside this very building while my white colleagues were welcomed in. That small moment of discrimination became the catalyst for something much bigger. He looked around the room. Today, I'm proud to present the first SkyWest Inclusion Report, documenting both where we were and how far we've come. The journey had not been easy. The company-wide stand-down day had revealed deeper problems than even Marcus had realized. Some employees shared painful stories of discrimination they had kept hidden for years. Others denied there was any problem at all. A few senior managers had resigned rather than participate in the changes. The external investigation led by Dr. Carter had uncovered clear patterns of bias in hiring, promotions, and disciplinary actions. Black employees were 60% less likely to be promoted than their white counterparts with similar performance records. Female pilots faced consistent barriers to advancement. Complaints about discrimination were routinely minimized or ignored. The findings had made national news, temporarily damaging SkyWest's reputation and stock price. But Miller had surprised many by embracing the criticism rather than defending against it. "We can't fix what we don't acknowledge," he had said in a press conference. SkyWest is committed to becoming a model of workplace equity, even if that means facing uncomfortable truths about our past. Now, as Marcus presented the 6-month results, there were signs of real progress. New hiring practices had increased diversity at all levels. The anonymous reporting system had resolved 27 complaints of discrimination, with transparent outcomes. Employee satisfaction scores among minority staff had improved by 40%. "We still have a long way to go," Marcus told the audience. "Change doesn't happen overnight. But we've laid a foundation for a more equitable workplace where everyone is valued for their skills and contributions, not judged by their race or gender." After the presentation, as people mingled and discussed the findings, First Officer Denise Washington approached Marcus. "Not bad for someone who was supposed to wait outside," she said with a smile. Marcus laughed. "It's been quite a journey. You?" "No," Denise said, her expression growing more serious. "When you first told me what you were doing, I was scared. I thought you were committing career suicide and maybe taking the rest of us down with you. There were moments when I thought the same thing, Marcus admitted. But you've changed things, Denise continued. Really changed things. 3 of my friends from flight school just got hired here. Black women who probably wouldn't have made it through the old hiring process. She paused. And I've been recommended for captain training. That's fantastic, Marcus said, genuinely pleased. You've earned it. Maybe. But I might not have gotten the chance without all this. She gestured around the room. So thank you. As Denise walked away, Miller approached. Impressive presentation, Captain Johnson. The board is pleased with our progress. They should be, Marcus replied. The numbers speak for themselves. They do, Miller agreed, which is why I wanted to discuss next steps with you. He lowered his voice slightly. We're creating a new position, Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. It would be a permanent executive role, reporting directly to me. The board would like to offer it to you. Marcus was surprised. Me? I'm a pilot, not an HR professional. You're also the person who had the courage to challenge us when no one else would, Miller pointed out. You've demonstrated leadership that goes far beyond flying planes. Dr. Carter speaks highly of your contributions to the task force, and the employee surveys show you have credibility across all departments. Marcus considered the offer. It would mean giving up flying, at least as his primary job. After 20 years in the cockpit, that was a significant change. I'd need time to think about it, he said finally. Of course, Miller replied. There's no rush, but I want you to know that this isn't just a symbolic position. It would come with real authority and resources. As Miller walked away, Marcus felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Linda, who had come to support him at the presentation. I heard that, she said. Sounds like a big decision. Marcus nodded. It is. I became a pilot because I love flying. I never imagined doing anything else. But, Linda prompted, knowing her husband well enough to hear the unspoken thought. But this work matters, Marcus continued. The changes we've made in 6 months, they're just the beginning. There's so much more to do, not just at SkyWest, but throughout the industry. Linda smiled. You know, when you first told me about being asked to wait outside, I was angry for you. But I never imagined it would lead to all this. Marcus looked around the room at the diverse faces engaged in serious discussions about the future of the airline. Neither did I. 2 weeks later, Marcus stood in the cockpit of a SkyWest Boeing 737, preparing for takeoff. This was his first flight in months, a special trip he had requested before giving Miller his answer about the VP position. First Officer Aaron Rivera, a young Hispanic pilot who had recently joined the airline, sat beside him. It's an honor to fly with you, Captain Johnson, Rivera said. You're something of a legend now. Marcus smiled as he ran through the pre-flight checks. I'm just a pilot who got tired of waiting outside. Well, whatever you want to call it, things are different because of you, Rivera continued. My cousin applied here 3 years ago and couldn't even get an interview. Now she's in the training program. The radio crackled with a message from the tower, and Marcus responded professionally. As they taxied toward the runway, he felt the familiar excitement of flight, the vibration of the engines, the weight of the controls in his hands, the vast sky waiting above. He had given Miller his answer yesterday. Yes, he would accept the VP position and help guide SkyWest's ongoing transformation. But with one condition: he would still fly at least once a month to keep his skills sharp and maintain his connection to his first love. As the plane accelerated down the runway and lifted into the air, Marcus felt a sense of satisfaction, unlike anything in his career. 6 months ago, he had been told to wait outside, a small act of discrimination that might have gone unchallenged like so many before it. Instead, it had become the catalyst for sweeping change, not just for him, but for hundreds of others. The plane climbed through the clouds into the clear blue above. From this height, the SkyWest headquarters building was just a tiny speck below, barely visible among the airport structures. But its impact on his life, and the lives of so many others, was immeasurable. Marcus smiled as he guided the aircraft higher. Sometimes the biggest journeys began with the smallest moments. Sometimes real change started with a single person refusing to wait outside any longer. "Beautiful day for flying," Rivera commented beside him. "Yes," Marcus agreed, looking out at the limitless sky. "Perfect for new beginnings."